Welcome, devotees. We're live in Facebook. If you're seeing this in Facebook, please share it and get your friends to come along and watch. You can also, there's a link in the stream there on Facebook if you prefer to watch in Zoom with us as well. But you can ask questions in either Zoom or in Facebook, and we'll take the questions at the end. You're at the right session. This session is with Swami Padmanabha. As you can see on our screen, he's talking today about healthy and unhealthy templates between guru and disciple. So I'm going to introduce myself briefly, and then I'll let you know a little bit about the format for today, and then I'll hand over to Maharaj in a moment. So my name is Ravi. I spent 7 years as a brahmachari between 1994 and 2001. Traveling in Ireland, England, and Africa, and sometime in India. I'm going to be your moderator today. So you'll see in the chat, you'll be able to send in messages to me, which I encourage you to do throughout. And then I will fill those questions at the end. So Maharaj is going to speak for about roughly an hour. And then we'll have Q&A at the end. So please do make sure as you're thinking of those questions, you're putting them in the chat, and we'll pick them up at the end. And hopefully we'll be able to, during the Q&A, bring you on camera and you'll get to ask a question yourself. So I'm going to just read a little intro to Maharaj, if you bear with me a moment. So actually, we can credit Maharaj with the suggestion for this conference. The Progressive Vaishnav group is a wonderful place where many devotees who are trying to think about things more deeply and more thoughtfully are able to have a space. And Swami Padmanabha suggested that we do this first annual Progressive Vaishnav conference, which is a great idea. And there's some amazing speakers and some great topics, including Maharaj's talk today. So Swami Padmanabha is an author. He's got a great new book, which I've ordered. I've just started reading it. It's very, very deep, and I'm really looking forward to continuing reading the rest of it. I suggest you also check it out. He's a monk. He's a spiritual mentor. Radical Personalism, the book that I was just referring to, is his second book. He spends at least half of every year traveling around the world and sharing the message of Mahaprabhu's divine love. Maharaj is a very thoughtful and deep devotee, which is a lovely quality. And at the moment, he's touring America, presenting his latest book, Radical Personalism. And today, he's talking to us from Namras's house in New Jersey. So I'm going to pass it over to Maharaj, and I'd like to give you a huge welcome and thank you for being here. And yeah, looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Pranam, Ravi, and pranam to all of you. And thanks so much for the invitation, for allowing me to be part of this event. And very fortunate, very happy to be today with all of you. And as it has been described, the idea today is to talk about healthy and unhealthy templates between guru and disciple. And what I will be sharing today basically is kind of a summary of many points that I've shared in my recent book, Radical Personalism. In chapter 11 of that book, it's a chapter called Issues and Tissues Between Guru and Disciple, which in itself is based on a series of lectures on Guru Tattva that I gave a few months ago. And somehow also this lecture today will be kind of a trailer, so to say, of a retreat that we will have with Deva Madhava Prabhu, Jai Jagannath Prabhu, and other devotees in Michigan next week. And there I will be talking also about Guru Tattva in case you are nearby or you would like to join the retreat as well. And the approach to Guru Tattva today, since the theme of the main conference is outside of the box, I will try to share a few perspectives on healthy and unhealthy templates in the guru-disciple relationship, which hopefully are outside of the box in the sense of invite us to think about this topic from alternative views, so to say, without, of course, transgressing our Gaudiya orthodoxy. So in connection to the title of today's talk, Healthy and Unhealthy Templates Between Guru and Disciple, I will try to move from what we may call an idealistic and a realistic template in the relationship between Guru and Disciple. And by idealistic, I refer in this case to how the ideal relationship between Guru and Disciple will look like idealistic, and by realistic, so I refer in this case to how in most cases, sometimes the most ideal scenario may not be present there, whether from the guru's side or many times from the disciple's side, or many times or sometimes from both. So how in those cases we will need to ascertain the situation and learn to navigate those particular waters. So let's begin with some of the idealistic content, so to say, or healthy template in the guru-disciple relationship. So let's begin there so we can have a proper reference point, so to say, to how this unique relationship is supposed to express itself, ideally, in the best possible scenario we could conceive. And I think it's important to have this idealistic scenario first to begin, so not to compare it with where we are and get discouraged or go neurotic, like it's not yet ideal, I must be doing something wrong or whatever, but just to establish some ideal long-term result, how this relationship guru-disciple should ideally look like, not only guru-disciple, but even any particular relationship. In this case, guru-disciple, which is basically one of the most sacred, if not the most sacred bond, so to say, that is most glorified throughout Hinduism in general, Gaudiya Vaishnavism in particular, very, very special connection. So regarding the guru, I will say that mostly every time that the Shastra, the scriptures, speaks about guru, it will do so from what we may call an idealistic perspective. That is, in other words, every time that the Shastra invokes the term guru, unless it clarifies otherwise, and then the Shastra speaks about guru and proceeds to chant the glories of the guru, proceeds to chant the qualities that he or she may have, just in case I add the word she here. So when the Shastra speaks about the glories of the guru, it does so while assuming the guru to be fully qualified to execute that particular function as a guru. Like when you read in an encyclopedia a description of an apple, the encyclopedia will assume that the apple is ideally red and everything is in place. It won't talk about a rotten apple. For that, it has to we will clarify separately. But when the general description of an apple will be given in an encyclopedia, it's assuming that the apple is ideal, so to say. So similarly, the scriptures will speak about guru and disciple from that idealistic perspective. And many times in the scripture, this is being said, and which has been done, and we should be aware of that. No, like for example, when the scriptures speak about sadhu sangha, sometimes say even from 1 nanosecond of sadhu sangha, you can attain all perfection. So yeah, ideally, if everything is in place, that can happen. Or even if you chant the holy name half a syllable, you can attain all perfection. So there is no artavad there. Artavad means exaggeration. There's no exaggeration, but just in those statements, there is a depiction of something that in potential could happen if all the ideal conditions are in place, starting with our own heart. So in the same way, almost every time that the scriptures speak about guru, they do so from this idealistic perspective, assuming the person performing that role is doing that from the perfect place. And in that connection, the scriptures will invite for an absolute surrender to the principle of guru, to such a divine personality. So it's important to have this in mind, because sometimes in practice, we may sometimes not find that level of idealistic situation, whether in a guru or in a disciple. So we have to know how to adjust accordingly. So it's important to us to consider that the scripture, again, not only assumes that the guru is an ideal representative every time it refers to such a person, but it also important to understand that the scriptures, when speaking about this, take for granted that the reader is aware that a scripture is speaking from such an idealistic perspective. So we should be aware of that, because if not, we may force ourselves, we may force others to fully surrender in situations where, unfortunately, sometimes the guru may not be on the level described in the Shastras ideal. So, and similarly, unless it's indicated otherwise, the same principle applies to the disciple. The glories of the disciple will be described in the scriptures, considering that he or she, the disciple, is an ideal example of the qualities that are to be expected from a disciple. And therefore, the guru in that case is expected to reciprocate accordingly to such an ideal disciple. But again, if both guru or disciple do not match that level of eligibility, so to say, then we are to adjust our stance accordingly. So which are these ideals or healthy templates that are to be found in both guru and disciple? A few words in that connection. Remember, we are in the healthy description of the equation, so to say. So there are three main verses in the scripture which describe the ideal qualities to be expected both from guru and disciple. Interestingly, the two types of qualities appear in the same verses. There are three verses, one from the Bhagavatam, one from the Gita, one from the Upanishads. I won't torture you with every detail of each verse, but the famous verses are Tasmat Gurum Prapadita, Jignashu Shriya Uttamam, Sabde Parichanishnatam, Brahmani Upashamashrayam. In the Bhagavatam, famous verse in the Gita, Tat Piti Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sivaya, Upadekshanti Te Gyanam, Gyaniнаstattva Darshinaha. And in the Upanishads, Sutashvatara Upanishad, if I'm not mistaken, Tat Vigyanartam Sagurumeva Vigachet Samit Panisratriyam Brahmanishtam. Just for those of you who will like to do the research eventually. So in these three verses, basically the same thing appears, the qualities of the guru and the qualities of the disciple. So in terms of the disciple, it begins always describing the qualities of the disciple, interestingly. So it describes the disciple is to exhibit some voluntary surrender. Surrender is always voluntary, not forced. Voluntary surrender and willingness to sacrifice in Guru Seva. Also, the disciple is to exhibit some comprehensive inquiry, humble and comprehensive inquiry in relation to the highest truth. And we could say also seva, loving service disposition. That's to be expected from the ideal disciple. So again, surrender, inquiry, and service, basically. And on the guru side, these three verses, each one with some nuance and difference, three qualities are emphasized as well. He or she, the guru, is to be expert in knowledge of the scripture. Then he or she must have inner realization of that knowledge, not only information, but transformation. And C, third, the guru has to be humanly balanced. And the Bhagavatam will say that with the term upasama ashrayam, which means has to have take shelter into tranquility. That's the way it's put in the Bhagavatam. So there are a few interesting points in this connection that I'd like to share. For example, this last point that I mentioned, guru is to be balanced in his or her humanity. So for us, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, spiritual advancement in our tradition entails integrating our humanity as well. We are not pursuing transcendence at the cost of humanity. Our idea of transcendence includes humanity. We worship Krishna, who is performing his pastimes, what's called Nara-lila, or human pastimes, human-like. But human-like doesn't mean half-baked humanity, but fully human, and fully divine at the same time. So our goal is Nara-lila, the place where there will be full humanity. So our eternal prospect is not only fully divine, but also fully human. So we have to do something with our humanity at present. And that means integrating it with our transcendent project. Of course, in some cases, we say the guru has to be balanced in her humanity. In some exceptional cases, we may find that there are very advanced devotees who, from a contemporary perspective, they may seem like socially dysfunctional, which will show symptoms such as an avadut, like a Bamsidas Babaji, someone like him. Like it may be difficult to relate with them on a normal basis, so to say. And in those exceptional cases, of course, we should be careful not to judge their adhikarim bhakti according to how they interact with the world. Again, they are an exception to the rule. But a guru, someone who is serving in that capacity, generally cannot be an avadut in a cave or someone that you cannot interact in a normal way, because generally a guru is to deal with other people, with other people's humanity, help them to navigate those waters. So the guru himself has to be balanced in his or her humanity, so his service is functional and healthy in connection to others. So in other words, my point here is a guru should not only have the adhikar or the eligibility of knowledge of scripture, and not only should have the adhikar of inner spiritual realization, but also he or she should have another adhikar, which is a balanced humanity, a balanced psychology, a balanced emotionality, at least on some considerable level. Because if not, if the guru, to give an example, the disciples' dharma, so to say, or duty, is to be vulnerable in front of the guru, to open her heart, surrender, and so on, vulnerability. But if the guru is not properly, fully balanced in his humanity, the guru may not know what to do with the disciples' vulnerability, and may trample of that vulnerability without bad intention even. But that may end up in a scenario of dysfunction or abuse or trauma, just because of not being expert enough in dealing with others' humanness, basically. So that's another important adhikar that I wanted to emphasize in this healthy template between guru and disciple. Something interesting also regarding the 3 verses that I just quoted, describing the qualities of both guru and disciple, is that in those verses, the qualities of the disciple are described first, always, in each of these 3 verses, not only to emphasize our role as disciples, what is expected from us as students, but also to emphasize the fact that the guru is first and foremost a disciple. And on that basis is a guru. Because again, guru is a service. Guru is not a post, a position. Guru is a service opportunity. So serving as guru is a service. It's not a position. So in a recent class that we gave with Tamal Krishna and Jai Jagannath in Alatra for Guru Purnima, I chose to focus on this fact. I gave the example of Vyasadeva, who is kind of the prototype of the guru figure for us. And Vyasa doesn't only show what the guru is expected to do, teaching the Shastra, show an example, investing his whole self while instructing Sukadeva Goswami, his son, but also Vyasadeva shows very nicely his side as a disciple, as a student, an eternal student. When he corrects himself publicly and not being satisfied with his compilation of the scriptures, and that gives rise to the Bhagavatam. Or then even interestingly, when he's hearing the Bhagavatam from Sukadeva Goswami's lips, I mean, he's hearing the Bhagavatam class from his disciple, basically, in ecstasy. And not only him, Narad Muni, who is Vyasa's guru, is along with Vyasa in ecstasy hearing Sukadeva Goswami. So that's parampara. Everyone is a guru and everyone is a disciple if both are properly situated. So I think that's an important point to make also for this healthy template. At the end of the day, we are all students forever, as Sridhar Maharaj will say. And also, as I mentioned in my book on this topic, if the guru is more advanced than the disciple, as he or she is expected to be ideally, we could say that then the guru has the capacity to learn more from the disciple than the disciple from the guru. And what do I mean by this? The more advanced you are, the greater capacity you have to learn from everyone, including your disciples. So Vyasadeva is showing this in this case. Now he's learning from said disciple, he's hearing. So I'm saying this because, again, gurus should be willing to learn, not only to teach. We are students forever. So in this way, both guru and disciple are disciples, both first. And of course, again, an exemplary disciple will naturally be guru, naturally, organically. So we could say that in this idealistic template, healthy template that I'm sharing, the words guru and disciple both become synonymous ultimately, because both guru and disciple are students, disciples, and the guru and the disciple, the ideal disciple, is also naturally guru. But again, I like to emphasize that point. Both guru and disciple are servants. Both of them are not only servants of each other in their own way. The guru is serving the disciple in his own way or her own way, and the disciple is serving the guru. But also the two of them are disciples because both guru and disciple are servants of a common higher ideal. So it's a teamwork, so to say. Guru and disciple are together and working together, serving a common ideal. That's a real healthy spirit. So some of these are the idealistic qualities or templates. So if these idealistic qualities are in place, as hopefully they should be, the relationship between guru and disciple should develop beautifully and smoothly. In the words of Srila Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the ideal mood to be cultivated in this relationship, the way that the relationship should unfold after both of them, guru and disciple, have accepted each other through initiation, he uses the term Vishrambhena Guru Seva, which basically means the disciple is expected to serve the guru with friendly confidence. So it's a type of friendship. The relationship with the guru should gradually, naturally evolve in a type of friendship from both sides, of course. Not like similar, like if you have a father, your father is your father, but if everything is in place, eventually he will become your friend also in a unique way. Or even if you are married, your wife will become eventually your friend, and your kids will become eventually your. Interestingly, almost every relationship in their natural development will end up in a form of friendship, almost all of them, including the relationship with the guru. And I mentioned this because unfortunately sometimes from the guru's side or from the disciples' side or from both, this is not emphasized enough. No, the importance of trust and confidence and friendship, at least as a goal to attain. And sometimes we end up with some unhealthy templates of fear and between guru and the disciple toward the guru, fear, intimidation, or too much aishvarya, too much an obvious of distance, formality, that somehow make the actual friendship that the relation is supposed to embody dissolve more and more. So I'll talk to that in a few minutes a little bit more. So also ideally, since we're still mostly talking about the idealistic healthy template, ideally the guru and disciple should get to know each other before accepting one another. I think that's an important point. Should get to know who is that other person. I mean, remember, guru disciple is a teamwork. So we have to know who we are working for, and if both of us are willing to work with each other in this important bhakti project. It's a type of marriage, if you will. No? So you need to know the other person before marrying each other, ideally. So guru disciple is its own marriage, so to say. So it's important because so the disciple is not only, for example, the disciple in that case will not only be acquainted with the absolute side of the guru, so to say, but with the relative side of the guru, by living with him or her and entering into the details of their human way of being, so to say. Sanatana Goswami emphasizes this in his Hari Bhakti Vilas a few times, not only once. He will say, ideally, guru and disciple should live together for a year before accepting one another. Of course, in nowadays contemporary dynamics, I understand the Gurukul scenario is not present for everyone. Not everyone can go and live with their guru for a year. But on some way or another, the essence of that instruction should be embraced. Take some time to know each other in one way or another. Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu also, he will famously say, a guru ideally should not accept too many disciples. And of course, too many it will be relative to each person. For some people, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, once he was talking about that, and someone asked him, but Gurudev, you are saying guru should not accept too many disciples, but you have so many. And he said, that's a matter of personal capacity, what's too many and what's little. For some people, to have one disciple is too much. For some people, to be a disciple is too much. No, so it's a matter of personal capacity. But my point is, Rupa Goswami mentions this idea, a guru should not accept too many disciples. I think it's also in connection to not only to the guru's adhikar, but also to keep the relationship personal and intimate. No? If you have like 15,000 disciples, probably you won't know who they are in detail. And there are cases like that. I'm not criticizing those who may have thousands of disciples. Srila Prabhupada had thousands, Narottam Thakur have thousands, some contemporary gurus have thousands. But I will say in those cases, then some system of personalized guidance and mentorship should be established. If not with the guru, with some of his or her representatives. So the connection and the mentorship continues in a very personal way, radically personal. So also I mentioned just a few minutes ago the absolute and relative sides of the guru. So I would like to mention a few words in this connection, because these two terms, the absolute and relative side of the guru, sometimes are employed and understood differently by different people. So we may be talking about that and each one may be understanding something completely different. So I'd like to clarify a few examples of how we could employ these terms and how to understand them. So one way to talk about that, and maybe it's the most classical one, is that the absolute side of the guru is the inner realization of the guru, his or her inner world of bhakti, which allows Krishna's will to be represented through that agent, so to say. The agency of Krishna's will represented through the agent of the guru. So that will be the absolute side. And the relative side in this case will be the side of the guru as a human being, which includes the possibility of some mild mistakes, we could say, certain imperfections, but which are not compromising the guru's integrity or inner standing. Again, mild mistakes, again, like forgetting a verse or committing some mild mistake. I'm not here justifying like abuses, like sexual abuse, of pastoral abuse, or other forms of deviation that should never be justified under the label of, oh, that's just the relative side of Gurudev. No, I heard that many times. No, like something really dangerous is going on, and that's his relative side. And the absolute side, he's not or she's not affected. No, we should employ discernment. So this is one idea, understanding of absolute and relative side of the guru. And another way we could talk about absolute and relative side, this is how Srila Siddhar Maharaj talked about it in Sri Guru and His Grace, is with the term Samasti Guru and Vyasti Guru. So the absolute side will be the Samasti Guru, the universal principle, which means the agency of Sri Guru, Krishna himself. Let's put it simply. Krishna is the original Guru. And Krishna is Bhagavan, God himself. He's the origin of our parampara, the original Guru. He's Samasti Guru Tattva. And the relative side in this case will be called Vyasti Guru. And Vyasti Guru will be the human representative of that agency. Samasti Guru is the agency, and Vyasti Guru is the agent who represents the agency. So, in other words, God is the original Guru. There are many verses in the Bhagavatam in which Krishna is described as not only Param Guru, Supreme Guru, but Param Guru Guru, or Param Param Guru, something like that. Like he's the Guru of all Gurus. So his will, his divine sweet will, his agency is represented by the Vyasti Guru in one degree or another. That's also, I think, an important point. There are degrees of representation. It's not that every single Vyasti Guru, individual Guru, is fully representing, is fully a transparent medium in Prabhupada's words to Krishna's agency. There may be degrees of that. Between black and white, there are shades of gray. So sometimes this Samasti Guru, the absolute side, the universal principle, is called Sri Guru. And the Vyasti Guru, who fully represents this Sri Guru, this Samasti, this agency, will be also called Sri Guru. Each of these topics, of course, requires a separate class. I'm trying to do my best to summarize some of these ideas without overwhelming you. And I'm sorry if this sounds a little complicated for some of you. Indeed it is, because Guru Tattva is a complex tattva, a complex department. In fact, Guru Tattva is said to be one of the most difficult tattvas or departments of truth to understand. So this is an important point, because if Guru Tattva is one of the most difficult tattvas to understand, that means that's one of the easiest tattvas to misunderstand. So we need to pay close attention to these topics. So anyhow, ideally, as disciples, we are expected to worship each individual guru. And this is a point I made in my book, and I'd like to clarify, of course. We are expected to worship each individual guru proportionately to how much he or she is representing Krishna, to how much he or she is representing Sri Guru. Ideally, the guru hopefully is representing Krishna's will 108%. But if this is not the case, we should be damn careful not to worship in the guru something that shouldn't be worshipped or shouldn't be absolutized, since that may be opening the door for abuse and confusion. You follow my point? If some guru is committing which again, hopefully this doesn't happen, and I would like not to have to talk about this, but unfortunately some of these things have happened, go into the realistic perspective. So if some wrong thing is going on in the name of guru, we should be careful not to worship that, to surrender to that, to absolutize that, because that can justify abuse. And externally, it may sound as surrender and devotion. I'm worshiping that aspect of that person. Well, I shouldn't be doing that. So that will be actually a form of idolatry. I put that in my book in those words. I say in my book, we can worship the wrong person, or also we can worship the right person for the wrong reasons. That also can happen. There are many possibilities from which place we are conducting our worship. So that has to do with how introspective we are as worshippers, as students, disciples. So for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the Guru is God. We hear that, but in which sense the Guru is God? The Guru is God in a representational sense. The Guru is representing God in one degree or another. So when we worship the Guru, we are worshiping the degree to which the Guru is representing God in our lives. That's what we are actually worshiping. If that's not there, that person is another human being, so to say. So we worship that person especially, but what we are actually worshiping is not the person separate from how much he or she represents Krishna. Actually, we are worshiping that degree of representation of God in our lives. So the degree of a disciple's surrender, in one sense, we could say it should be proportionate, should be reciprocal to the degrees of the Guru's surrender. So in that sense, we must properly assess and corroborate how much fully the Guru represents the divine. And of course, when I'm saying this, I'm not saying at every day of your relationship, you're a Guru. You are just like measuring how much surrender you are, Gurudev, how much surrender you are tomorrow. But my point is, once you accept your Guru in a proper way, and of course, if the Guru behaves properly, hopefully that's the idea, of course, that's okay. You don't need to be measuring that. But before accepting the Guru and before accepting the disciple from both sides, the scripture is saying both have to be examining one another. So you accept someone for the proper reasons, or even in the case that someone has accepted a spiritual master, but unfortunately the Guru may start to behave in an improper way, then when one may need to apply some discernment in that connection. So in those two cases, before accepting or after accepting but with some wrong behavior in between, the disciple may need to examine what to do, basically. Remember, when the scripture mandates full surrender toward the Guru, the Shastra is saying that, bearing in mind, the Guru is an ideal representative of the agency, not a partial representative, not a deviated one, and so on. Now, to give you an example, I don't know, if the Guru is requesting the disciple compromise your identity or go against the values and principles that I talk to you, of course, the Guru may not say it like that, but may request something like that in forms of abuse or hypocrisy or different forms of spiritual bypassing. In those cases, which again are unfortunate scenarios that we hope nobody of you will have to go through, but in those cases, if the Guru is requesting the disciple basically go against your principles, one will be instructed not to surrender in that direction, because that's not the agency of Sri Guru. That's not Krishna's will acting through that individual agent. The example can be the one of let's say, a policeman, for example. A policeman is representing the police agency, the police department. So when you surrender, if you continue with the idea of surrendering to the Guru, surrendering to a policeman is not surrendering to that person divorced from the police department. You trust the policeman because you think, okay, she's representing the police department. So instead of, I'm actually not surrendering to the policeman, to the policewoman, I'm surrendering to the police department and the fullness in which that person is representing that. If not, that policeman may go to jail if it's misrepresenting the agency. So some similar idea may be applied in connection to guru representing God and how the disciple is expected to behave. So it's not healthy for the disciple to to blindly surrender. I mean, I hope that's even not necessary to clarify, but I'm just mentioning just in case. Surrender has to be voluntary, has to be well-informed, has to be sincere, not blind, not forced, not imposed, not by social pressure, by a forced sense of fitting in, by deep willingness to belong. So it's not healthy for the disciple to blindly surrender to someone who does not fully represent God's will. And of course, similarly, we could say it's damaging for the guru to accept disproportionate surrender from the disciple. And what do I mean by this? It's not healthy for the guru to accept more surrender than he or she can handle. I mentioned that in my book like that. No? If a guru is receiving lots of dedication from her students, but he or she is not able to process all that degree of surrender, it can happen. You have to have an adhikar for that. If you are not able to properly digest all that degree of surrender and dedication, one may have one's own standing and function as a guru compromised. So these are different types of eligibility that one may have as a guru. So again, for the guru-disciple relationship to be idealistic or ideal, also we could say it has to be first realistic also. So first need to both know each other, as we mentioned, ideally, to know what to expect from each other in a sustainable way, in a grounded way, not based on over-idealization, over-expectation. However, if both guru and disciple sign this contract of over-idealization in both directions, not only the disciple over-idealizing the guru, but the guru can over-idealize the disciple and the degree of dedication the disciple should be exhibiting. If both sign this over-idealization contract, maybe both of them may embark upon a journey in which both of them are over-idealizing each other, over-expecting certain exchanges with one another, and in many cases, they may end up cheating one another to make the journey sustainable, so to say, not to face the actual truth of what may be happening. So I'm trying to nuance between the idealistic and the realistic perspective. Of course, the guru-disciple relationship has the greatest potential to personify the most beautiful type of exchange, the most loving, deep, intimate type of bond, very mature, very inspiring. But that very same relationship, which has such a beautiful, bright potential, if it's not handled with maturity, with sincerity, with introspection, sometimes that same relationship can create the greatest forms of abuse and trauma. So we have to pay attention. So let me go to a final section in which we will be sharing a few examples before concluding on this, how the unhealthy templates between guru and disciple. So regarding over-idealization, many times a naive disciple may declare, I don't know, my guru is infallible, my guru is omniscient, like over-glorification of the guru. In one sense, we can never glorify Sri Guru enough, but there's a way of doing that. In another sense, we can over-glorify the guru, like saying things that are not accurate, like Gurudev is infallible, he cannot commit any mistake in any way, even mild mistakes, and he's omniscient, he knows everything about everyone. And that's not necessarily the case. As we already mentioned, the guru can make mild mistakes without compromising her inner standing. And there's no problem with us acknowledging that. The famous example with Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, once he mispronounced a word, and some of his disciples were, okay, the dictionary has to change now, because Gurudev cannot make any mistakes. So if he pronounced the word like that, it means the dictionary was wrong. And all of them were like glorifying each other, like, you have such a faith in Gurudev. And Srila Siddhar Maharaj was there and that's not correct. That's not the mature type of faith. We have to point to that mild mistake in his service, correct that in service of Sri Guru, and understand it's a mild mistake. It's not a problem. So no problem in acknowledging those things. So in those cases, if I'm forced to feel Gurudev cannot make any mistake ever, the real question is, why do I need to make him or her infallible on such a degree? It is due to a strong faith that I feel that, or sometimes it is due to a weak faith that I need someone to be perfect in order to love him. Because if I see a mild mistake, I can no longer love you. So that actually points to how weak is our love. If I can only love you if you're perfect, that's called conditional love. There's a condition, which is you have to be perfect for me to love you. But we are expected to love Sri Guru unconditionally as we are being loved. So unconditionally means there may be mistakes, again, mild mistakes in this case of the Guru, and I love that person. So no, the Guru is not necessarily infallible in every sense of the term, and it's okay. And also the Guru is not omniscient. That quality only belongs to Bhagavan. In Shastra, that's clearly described. I won't go into detail now about that. But the Guru is not omniscient. Of course, the Guru may be in some sections declared to be Sarvagnya or knowing, all-knowing, but in which sense? In the sense that if the Guru is totally surrendered, Krishna will reveal in the Guru's heart whatever he or she needs to know. In that sense, the Guru is omniscient, because direct connection with Krishna in the heart and fully represents whatever Krishna reveals there. In my book, I deal in further detail with all of these points I'm talking about here now. So I'll conclude that section here on infallibility and the Guru being omniscient. Also, another possible unhealthy template is sometimes the disciple may need to abandon his or her Guru. Again, this is not the desired scenario, but it may happen due to some unfortunate circumstances. And also sometimes we could say there is a possibility when Guru and disciple do not abandon each other, accept each other externally, but on an internal level, they are rejecting the essence of their relationship. So what do I mean by this? For example, the currency of the relationship between Guru and disciple is surrender, ideally. But sometimes the surrender may show itself externally, but internally what's there is codependency. It can happen. A Guru can become a narcissist. And if there is every danger to be that, even if the Guru is not a narcissist, if one doesn't take care, that may happen eventually. Narcissist, among many things, is someone who thinks, I need you to need me. No? Or something what Purnachandra Swami called in his book, Unspoken Obstacles on the Path to Bhakti, he will call celebrity consciousness instead of Krishna consciousness, where the Guru is more like a pop star instead of a Guru for the disciple. And the Guru enters into that role, plays the rock star, pop star to the audience. Or no, I don't know, a disciple wanting to belong, but instead of deeply belonging, forcing himself, herself to fit in and to compromise his integrity just to be part of the crew, so to say. Or what else? Sometimes disciples surrender to the Guru externally. They use the external form of surrender to avoid the internal form of surrender, not to take personal responsibility. It's like, okay, Gurudev, I surrender to you. So whatever you tell me, I do. And I have no more responsibility, because if I do something and it's wrong, you told me that, you told me to do that. Sometimes we may use the word surrender to not take full individual responsibility. Or anyhow, so many possible scenarios. Misconstruing, oh, Gurudev is so advanced because he opens so many temples, he has so many disciples, he's so famous, he receives so much donations, and none of those things have to do with the internal eligibility of the person. The person may be completely capable, but we are judging his eligibility on the wrong basis. And so that can happen as well. Or something that can happen as well in some cases is unacknowledged parent-child transference issues, so to say, in which a disciple, for example, may still endeavor to appease a Guru who may be punitive and even violent, And this may be especially possible if a disciple had an angry or abusive parent. Sometimes we replicate these templates, unresolved, sometimes trauma in childhood with our parent figure, and that takes us to a certain direction to repeat the pattern over and over again. So whether it's this or any other form of unresolved trauma, again, both guru and disciple should remain on guard against fake versions of actual surrender. So many things can, again, play themselves out in the name of surrender, but actual surrender may be something quite different. Something that also it's important to bear in mind is the aparat, what I call in my book, the aparat neurosis. Because sometimes I'm saying these things and someone might say, Maharaj, what you are saying is aparat. You cannot speak about guru or disciple like that. That's an offense and so on. So sometimes we end up using the term aparat. The term has been extremely weaponized, I have to admit. Historically, the very word aparat acquired such a weight that many times the term is used to just to cancel critical thinking or constructive criticism. You are being offensive. No, that's aparat. Don't talk about that. That's offense. No, so there's no more conversation. Especially sometimes when topics on the guru-disciple relationship are brought to the table, many times the aparat neurosis manifests, so to say. So as we already mentioned, acknowledging a mild mistake in the guru is not aparat, and acknowledging grave mistakes in a guru is not aparat either. But those will be things that we will need to see in order to prevent abuse. So let's not use this term aparat just to in a weaponized way to avoid any actual necessary conversation, and let's not be frozen by fear and intimidation in that connection. Again, if especially in the case of a guru committing a mistake, committing a grave one, which again, hopefully that doesn't happen. I'm not here promoting that or wishing that to happen. On the contrary, but again, providing some discernment in case that happens. So if that happens, there should be a place for the guru acknowledging that mistake. There is a healthy place for acknowledging one's mistakes, not only for the guru, of course, for anyone. No. Or if you know that something is going wrong, you should do something about it. That's part of our tradition. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, I quote that in my book. It is said that a person who knows things as they are and still does not bear witness becomes involved in sinful activities. So it's not just like, oh, I know there is such abuse between such person and such person, but that's between them. No. I'm in the next room knowing about the abuse, but I'm not being abused. So that's between them too. No, I'm become implicated by being aware of that. So if something is expected in response to our awareness. So everyone should be held accountable. That's the point. Not only the disciple also, of course, if the disciple makes a mistake, he or she is expected to be held accountable. But if the guru makes a mistake, a grave one, again, we are not just pushing too much into mild mistakes, he or she should be made accountable. So we can guarantee a healthy template for both guru and disciples to develop their relationships. And in this connection, I have a few more minutes before we go to the Q&A. So in this connection, I like to emphasize the importance for someone serving in the capacity of guru, the importance of not only having relationship with juniors, but also with seniors, and maybe even more especially with peers. Someone serving as a guru, the importance of peer review, so to say, of feedback from equals. So the guru will remain grounded, sober, and accustomed to be lovingly confronted by equals, so to say. Confrontation is not aparat. Again, confrontation can be a form of intimacy. If I confront someone lovingly, that's a way of showing my affection to that person. So, because if there's nobody available or even allowed to offer constructive feedback, the guru remains like in a very precarious situation. It's like in a totally isolated bubble. And in those cases, sometimes those mistakes that the guru may be committing start to take a life of their own, so to say, and will reveal themselves in louder and louder way. And when I say this, I'm not saying that to criticize any guru, but just to emphasize the need even to take care of the guru. If someone's serving as a guru sincerely, we have to take care of that person. And one way of taking care is providing that person the opportunity for receiving honest feedback, not only by seniors, not only by juniors, but especially by peers. Again, if not, guru remains trapped, isolated in the bubble of Aishwarya, and many times devoid of actual friendship and intimacy. So that's very cruel to do that to a guru, basically, or to allow oneself to be in that situation. So I in one sense, of course, our Gaudiya tradition has acknowledged, historically has recognized this vertical accountability, this hierarchical accountability from up to down, so to say. But sometimes I will say constructive criticism to our community, sometimes we lack enough emphasis on lateral accountability. Again, by which gurus are lovingly corrected by peers and equals, or sometimes even by disciples in some very specific cases. That's mentioned in Shastra. Remember, this is a teamwork. So if both guru and disciple are sincere, as they should, it ultimately doesn't matter who corrects whom. If both are sincerely invested in serving a common ideal with humility and sincerity, it doesn't matter who corrects whom. Both sides will feel equally blessed and humbled by the care and the affection shown by one another. So that should be normalized. And I'm not saying this, oh, now great, Maharaj is giving me an excuse to correct my guru at every moment. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying if the circumstance happens to be in that way, constructive criticism, affectionate feedback is not apparat. It's just a way of showing affection and concern to that person. So anyhow, a few thoughts that I wanted to share today on this topic in connection to healthy and unhealthy templates between guru and disciple. Of course, there's so much we could say, and we should speak about this crucial topic. So, but in summary, the guru is not the owner of the disciple. The guru is the servant of the faith of the disciple. That's the role of the guru, a servant of everyone's faith. And the guru is the friend of the disciple. And the same applies to the disciple toward the guru. The disciple is a servant of the guru and is a friend of the guru in its own unique way, each one from their own perspective in their own unique way. So in other words, and with this I'm finishing, the ideal guru-disciple relationship is not so much a hierarchical, monarchical, or pyramidal relationship, but ideally it's a result of a circular collaboration, a teamwork, a spiral, so to say, collaboration, where the sharing and the nourishing are always mutual, reciprocal, never unidirectional. It's a sharing that flows in every possible direction in the service of this common ideal of divine love. So anyhow, some thoughts I want to share today in connection to this topic. We open the door for any questions, comments, answers, whatever you would like to share.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much. So I've just invited people to put questions in the chat here. We have one question over on Facebook, which I'll come to in a moment. I just wanted to pick up on a few of the things you said, which I thought were great. I love that statement you made towards the very end. The guru is the servant of the faith of the disciple. That's a beautiful statement. I love the point you made about the more advanced you are, the greater your capacity to learn from everybody, including your disciples. Recently, I run a film company. We were filming at a university and we were speaking with some professors, and they were talking about the postdocs. Now, the postdocs are after you do your degree, you do your master's, you do your PhD, then you do what we call the postdocs. And they're actually doing the research in the labs. The professors get all the credit. The professors are the ones who get the name on the paper, but the postdocs are actually doing all the work. And typically the postdocs feel very underappreciated, very undervalued. And we were doing this piece of film to try and encourage other departments to understand the value of the postdocs. But the point being, the professor was saying that actually the professor can learn so much from the postdocs, because the postdocs are actually very expert because they've been studying this for a long time, but they're still in that phase where they don't have a name they don't have anything to lose, so they can be curious, they can be experimental, they can actually look at things from a new perspective that perhaps the professor can't, because he's been boxed in, because he's sort of made a path for himself and he kind of has to say it a particular way because he's kind of, that's his whole thesis. Whereas the postdocs can actually look at the questions in a new, fresh way. And actually the professor can learn so much from that. So it just brought that to mind from what you were, that point you made, I thought was a beautiful point.
Yeah.
Please say something.
One word in that connection that I appreciated, of course, that I would say that in this connection, again, speaking about the guru being an eternal student, the guru, I've seen many times how in time, if you become not only a guru, but I talk about myself like as a sannyasi and witnessing other situations, or a leader position of seniority, authority, mentorship. Many times you, as you mentioned, you enter into certain box and you are expected to perform in a certain way, so to say, and not go outside that box, and you kind of become trapped into what's expected from you as a authority figure, and the learning is over, so to say. You become stagnant and you lose all this childlike spirit of wonder and constant learning, because you cannot do that. You are Maharaj, this is expected from you. And many times without knowing, we were talking yesterday about that with Namras and Tulsi here. Sometimes we have these ideas of, okay, to be a sannyasi means this. So whomever fits that box is supposed to move around those boundaries, but not outside of them. And many of those boxes are so constricted, so limited. And those who enter the box kind of like sign the contract and lose so much of their individuality, basically, so that shouldn't be happening, at least in my opinion. But it's important that somehow we guarantee that whomever is in those higher ranked positions, so to say, are continually growing and learning and keeping the childlike experience. It's not like, okay, I'm now guru, I have nothing to learn, I'm now sannyasi, I will only instruct others, I will give only predictable answers, I will only be attached to certitude. No. There's place for uncertainty. There's place for mystery. There is place for so much learning, even more than before. So anyhow, some thoughts that came regarding your point.
Yeah, thank you. And we have one question, but I just very briefly on the point about disagreeing with the guru. So when I joined, I spent my 7 years as a brahmachari traveling with a devotee called Tribhuvanath, who was Srila Prabhupada's disciple, a lovely devotee. And I wanted to be initiated by him. Very much was, heart and soul I gave to him. But he wouldn't take any disciples. And I remember one time we were in his room in the Birmingham temple upstairs, and we were discussing something, and it was we were started arguing, and then I left, we got upset with each other, and I went down to take rest in the room, and he came into the room and he paid obeisances to me, and then I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I said, "Oh, that was the worst one yet," as in the worst argument yet. And he said, "Or the best one. It depends how you look at it." So it was just this, at that time, it very much didn't fit the bill. I mean, even now, that people probably can't understand. How can you argue like that? And how can that's not how it's supposed to be. But it was a real relationship. Like, it was very real, and it was what it was, and it was a special relationship. We have a question here from Deva MD, and maybe Deva Madhava. If someone feels now to open the box on Guru to pursue something of the dynamic that you've described, how would you advise them to do that? So perhaps, is Deva here? Would you like to put your camera on, and I'll unmute you if you like, and you can actually explain that a bit more, maybe. Dave, are you there? Maybe not. If you okay, so you're
he's there.
I'm gonna just ask him to unmute, and he can explain. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Yes, essentially, if anyone's inspired by the dynamic you described, Maharaj, but they don't see how to bring that into their current experience of the relationship for a myriad of reasons, either the atmosphere in general, of course, but then there's a certain habit, there's a certain track that things are already moving in, how to then move into the different track and transfer the experience into the more dynamic one that you've described.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it to the practical, more even hyper-realistic situation of anyone's. So, of course, the question is general. We are not addressing here any specific case of one single person, which will be to be realistic, that's how it works. You address specific individuals in specific situations, and each one will be very different. But I can understand, but your question that the implication that in many situations that what we have been talking today is not so much brought to the table, but someone may get to hear about the things and feel, yeah, this makes sense, sounds sensitive, sounds commonsensical. And again, I'm trying to present the things in a way that is not Swami Padmanabha's Siddhanta, so to say, but with reference to Shastra, and hopefully with common sense, which should be another form of Praman, another form of evidence, not only Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu, but common sense in between all of them. So I will just, of course, if someone feels some inspiration to pursue this type of perspective, but feels that the environment is not fully supportive, I will encourage that person to not feel discouraged by the lack of support and find connection with kindred spirits who may share these views, and of course also try to be compassionate and understanding why the other people may find some of these situations, I don't know, confusing or challenging, and give them time also to process that. Because with this, I'm not saying whomever does it differently is wrong and should be left or something. I'm not saying that. In many cases, we need to be compassionate and patient and forgiven, as we are, as other people is compassionate and forgiven towards us. So it's a gradual process, especially if some of these topics are historically presented in a certain perspective and people have some scars or ways of immediately addressing those. So if something new is coming, it may take some time to process. So I will encourage that, to be patient on some level with the environment, but also if some call is coming in one direction, one should also nourish that. If that's genuine, one should not suppress that, and one will be doing that in proper association. So the importance of sharing with kindred spirits, at least one or two. Maybe it may not be a massive environment, but even if you find one or two birds of the same feather, you can flock together in a very healthy way. Again, it's a general answer. Every specific case will have to be addressed more individually.
Thank you, Maharaj. So we have some questions from Facebook, some comments. I'm going to read out, I think some may be questions, some may be comments. Lena Florio, is it fair to imagine Guru as mentor, meeting us on our shared potential bhakti, both still traveling the path, reciprocal development of self-realization? Hare Krishna. So I guess that's more along the lines of how you see it. It's definitely not how sometimes people might be presented, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I've thought about that many times. Of course, it's very connected to what do we understand by each of those words, no? Because sometimes we say guru and mentor, and again, each of us may have already a figure out idea of what both terms mean, and on that basis we can say yes or no. But I personally like the idea of connecting these two, because sometimes what's guru also? Now we say guru, but there are so many ways of talking about guru. No? It's not only the one who gave you diksha. You have the idea of diksha guru or siksha guru or bhatma pradarshaka guru or chaitya guru. And in one sense, in the Bhagavatam itself teaches you can have, the earth is your guru. Everything can be instructing you, 24 gurus. So what's guru at the end of the day? Of course, there are many ways of talking about that, and all of them are great. I'm not canceling any of those, but I'm saying that the word has a myriad of ways of being addressed. I always like how Srila Siddhar Maharaj once he was approached and someone asked him, who is more important, the Diksha Guru or the Siksha Guru? And he replied, that person who is helping you the most. Period. No? Taking out of the box, taking the question out of the box and replying from a different perspective. So a mentor, at least again for me, mentor is someone who is guiding you, accompanying you, sharing your journey. And as I mentioned today, ideally the guru is expected to do that. And if for some reason the guru cannot do that, ideally some arrangement is expected to be done for that to happen, because we need some companions on our journey. So I personally have no problem connecting these two words, guru and mentor. Again, in some circles, Gaudiya circles, the function of the guru may be performed differently, so to say, and the guru gives the mantra and initiation and some general instruction, but there is not a day-to-day rapport. And I can understand, again, I'm not downplaying that, but also I'm not canceling the other possibility, which is beautiful. I mean, we need mentors. Even if your guru is not performing that function for whatever reason, again, it's very important to have day-to-day companions, so to say, in your journey, with whom you can share, you can be vulnerable, you can share your struggles, because that's another whole department of topic. But many times we are not accustomed to share from that place of vulnerability and a struggle, and we end up just like putting a nice face for the Sunday feast, so to say. And each of us are having their own struggles, but we don't talk about that, and those who are the leaders are over-idealized, and so the leaders also are not going through any struggle because they are super empowered or whatever. So we don't have any reference point to see, okay, that person went through all these struggles and now reached that position, so I can take that as an example. Sometimes that's not so much present, and that affects our faith, our journey. While sometimes some people may say, no, like the famous autobiography of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Swalikita Jivani, where he shares his whole life and how he became a Vaishnava and all that happened before. And in many Gaudiya circles, that autobiography is not allowed, because they'll say, no, that will relativize the figure of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So we want to protect your faith, so we want to keep you with an super absolutized idea of him. But in one sense, that may affect your faith negatively, because, again, everything is totally perfect. Everything is a lila. There was no mistake ever. So you cannot relate to that because you are going through so much imperfection and struggle. So I think we need a lot of these references which are or have been messy like us and gradually have moved through the different navigated the waters of bhakti and so on. So a mentor in many ways plays that role. That's my point. Now, it may be someone more advanced, but who can really empathize with my current stage in the journey, so to say, whether it's my guru, whether it's someone in connection to him. Anyhow, some thoughts about that. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It picks up on the point you made earlier about if the guru or the disciple are both enter into this over-idealization contract you talked about earlier, then it's actually becomes a prison in a way for both of them, because in order to maintain that premise on both sides, then you at some point you're probably forced to be to lie, to not be honest, and then that's a really unhealthy position to be in. Next one, Bhakti Rasdasi, cheating is required. Let me just find it. Cheating is required in order to sustain relationships where one or both partners over-idealize the other. I think she's relaying the same point. This seems a critical jumping off point for the development of many unhealthy patterns. There's no room for vulnerability and therefore no room for personalism. It's very much picking up on that same last point you were making about, like, let's just say if I have been through some real struggles, but I know that you think I'm this great person, and even though you could massively benefit from me telling you those stories, I can't tell you those stories, because then you might realize that or think less of me or something like that, right?
Yeah. And that propels a whole like guilt trip and shame trip, because if I show myself as who I really am, I won't be loved, I won't be accepted. And then that entails a whole misconception of I will be only loved and accepted if I show myself to be perfect, which that goes totally against the principle of unconditional love. And that's interesting, because we may not realize that, but many times we travel the devotional project, so to say, with that idea in mind. I have to be perfect, and if I cannot be perfect, at least I have to show myself as perfect. No, so I am accepted and I'm loved. That's the code in the material world, but many times we import that and put that inside of how we conduct ourselves in the devotional society. For example, again, going my personal experience as sannyasi, I've seen so many times how people expect you to be a superhero, basically. And I understand people need superheroes in their lives. That's why superheroes are popular in comics and all that, the archetypal figure. But the point is that if you over-idealize someone, I mentioned that in my book, if you over-idealize someone, you are dehumanizing that person. You are taking away the humanity of that person, and that's not healthy. So at least personally, as a sannyasi, I try to struggle a lot to keep myself human and relate to other people's from a human place as well. No, it's not just here is the superhero, over idealize me and expect from me who knows what. And if I do not have that adhikar, at least I will fake it till I make it. No, in my book I make a play of words. Instead of saying fake it till you make it, I say naked till you make it. Also, like, you have to be naked, you have to be vulnerable, you have to be raw, you have to be transparent and honest till you make it. That's how you will make it, not fake it. No, Gaudiya Sampradaya is rejecting a form of cheating and hypocrisy. That's how the Bhagavatam begins. Dharma praito kaitavo tra. This book rejects all forms of cheating dharma or cheating in the name of religion. So that's how our main book begins. But many times we contradict that by, in the name of religion, we cheat so much, we hide so much, we escape from so much. So I think it's important to allow our humanness or our weakness, our brokenness, our woundedness as crucial part of our journey, our imperfection, our failure, to normalize failure, as I put in my book, not to traumatize failure, but to normalize failure, and to have that hope that I'm being loved unconditionally by Krishna despite my imperfection, not as an excuse to be lazy, but just as a foundational hope on which basis I can improve and change. I'm imperfect and Krishna loves me unconditionally. Let's begin from that. Not like I'm perfect and I try to be perfect. If not, Krishna won't love me. That's a total recipe for trauma and neurosis to begin with. But many devotees work on that foundation, and that's not healthy, I can tell you. Yeah.
Definitely. I mentioned it in the first session earlier today with David Madhava. He quoted you, and I was just reflecting on this. I love this term, the Bhakti Project, because what it brings to mind is, like it's like a whole bunch of, newspaper cuttings and bits of string and glue and all on a table. And it's like a craft thing I'm putting together. And I don't even know exactly what it's going to look like yet. And I'm figuring it out. And it's kind of, the materials are kind of organic. And so it feels like that. Whereas a lot of times where we fall into the feeling that, no, my Krishna consciousness, it should be like a slick, very well organized, perfectly timed, perfectly coordinated presentation, and it should be impressive. It should be something that when I deliver it, like I knock people out and like that's so amazing, which is very different, and I think that puts tremendous pressure on us, and it also encourages us to cheat because we feel like we're more attached to how the outcome of how people are going to think about us. Whereas I love that language of the Bhakti Project, because it's almost like no one's looking anyway. Just sit there and enjoy it and try and figure it out. And I really liked it. I really liked it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I agree with that. It's a work in progress, and we are not here to impress anyone, but just to develop proper impressions, some scars in ourselves, and be humble. And it's not an ego project. Like I try to be perfect. I mean, it's not about being perfect even. No? And what's perfection? And you can always become more perfect. There's no limit to how much you can progress. So it's not about reaching a certain place. Okay, I'm done. I'm on the other side. I'm saved. I'm perfect. Bhakti is the goal, but bhakti is the means, and bhakti is the goal. So we are already doing what we want to do for eternity. So in one sense, there's nowhere to go. It's just going deeper and deeper into what you already are doing, and not being like calculating, reach there, be perfect, impress that one, but just be humble and grateful for the opportunity that has come, and continue growing from that, with integrating all the messiness. Again, that's part of the beauty. Like in Japan, they have this art called kintsugi, that when a pot breaks, instead of throwing it, they put it together back, and they fill all the broken parts with liquid gold. So they highlight the brokenness. They highlight the scars, like saying, okay, this pot has a history of itself. They highlight the timeline of this pot, so to say, instead of throwing it or hiding it. So I appreciated that, like our scars and our brokenness, what we have gone, that's part of our devotional story. If you study the story of many devotees in the Bhagavad, and they're a mess. I mean, they make mistakes. Indra is a devotee, he makes so many mistakes. Brahma said is one of the main acharyas in our sampradaya. He made his mistakes. No?
Can I ask you a question on that?
Brahma Vimohan Lila, Mahaprabhu is praising that section of the Bhagavatam as one of the most important. That's Brahma is messing it up there. So, but he's glorious for us. We are not downplaying him. We are learning from that, and we can relate so much and so on. So,
yeah.
Sorry, you were going to ask something.
No. I was just going to ask a question on that point, because it's something I've thought about many times. We're often like presented like that. Oh yeah, but these are just leelas. These are just this is not real. They didn't really make the mistakes. They weren't really having the problems or struggling. It's just all leelas and nothing. And I just personally find that so, I don't know, there's something wrong about that for me. And also it just kind of, it's almost like as well that idea that like, even if we see like, you know, Srila Prabhupada or anyone, and we put them up on such a big pedestal, how am I supposed to like follow that? Like if this person is just floated down from the spiritual world on some leela, and it's all it's all just like then that's just totally not attainable. It's not something you can follow. There's no real struggle there.
Yeah.
You know, so what about like, are we saying that no, they actually were bewildered and they actually were really struggling and they actually really did learn a lesson?
Yeah, and we have to accommodate that. That's a challenge for us. And sometimes we want to avoid the challenge and we label everything as Leela. Like this autobiography, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, there he mentions that he's eating fish or things like that. And if you ask, no, that was a Leela. So the real question is, what urges you to label everything as Leela? And probably it's because if you actually accept that as something that they actually went through that and so on and so forth, that's relative, that's not absolute. You have to develop a faith that, again, is unconditional. And again, most of us are not ready to pay the price for unconditional love. Most of us ready to love someone only if they are perfect. So we've imposed this total perfection and everything is Leela. So I can be comfortable because everything is perfect, everything is Leela, so I love you. But that's not unconditional love. And sometimes devotees, we were talking with Jai Jagannath about that the other day, sometimes devotees think every guru is a Nitya Siddha. Every guru is an eternal associate of Krishna. So all the gurus are Nitya Siddhas. That's complex, because if you're a Nitya Siddha, means you were never under the influence of Maya. So you don't have an experience of what you go through in illusion. So how much the guru can empathize with the plight of the disciple, how much the guru is equipped to deal with the situation of the disciple if they are all coming from Golok Vrindavan and have no clue about what does it mean to be in illusion. So instead of actually praising and qualifying those personalities, you are unqualifying them because you have no experience of what I'm going through, but you are my guru, so how much you can understand what I'm going through and instruct me accordingly. And nowhere in Shastra, of course, does it say the guru is every guru is a Nitya Siddha. And on top of that, how you can measure if someone is a Nitya Siddha or not, that's another conversation altogether. But the real question is, what forces you to label all these personalities, Nitya Siddha, pure devotee, Leela? And at the end of the day, it boils down to, at least I will say in general, to our lack of capacity of accepting someone unconditionally and needing everything to be nice and perfect. So we give ourselves without that much challenge, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. There's a nice point here again from Facebook. Vrinda Sundari Stephanie says, what can be said about when Sri Guru comes through various gurus or mentors, or when Sri Guru no longer comes through one devotee we have had that relationship with? Some practitioners experience feelings of guilt for not having the affinity or flow of Sri Guru in that relationship anymore. So in other words, I presume where there was a strong, relationship there, and for some reason, whatever it is, it has stopped. Yeah,
of course, again, thank you, Brenda Sundari, for the question. it's a general question again. Every time I receive a general question, which of course are totally legal and valid, but I try to make it clear. One thing is a general question, but every case is very different. Like what you are mentioning, Brinda Sundar, is, okay, a disciple has felt something with her guru, but eventually that experience disappeared or was watered down or whatever. So what to do? Well, the point first, why the person is no longer feeling what he or she felt in the beginning. It may be because of some fault of the guru, or maybe some fault of the disciple. I mean, so many possibilities are there. So of course I cannot give it a specific reply, because the point is, if the disciple is actually doing something wrong, then the reply will be, you have to figure out what you have to adjust in your own heart, so the magic comes back, so to say. But if it's actually the guru, let's give an example, a scenario, the guru did something very grave, or is not being transparent and honest, whatever, to give an example again, then the disciple may be actually justified not feeling inspired with that, and may even need to take a distance from that and rediscover the flow of guru tattva somewhere else. But again, I don't want to say just like that quickly or cheaply, because maybe in some cases the disciple is the mistaken part, compromised part, who may need to do an adjustment. But so whatever the case, of course, we need to be in touch with that flow of guru tattva, whether it takes the form of one's diksha guru, in connection to siksha gurus, I mean, some transition chapters. I have some experience about that. And sometimes you will feel more connected with the Chaitya Guru, with Shastra, with the Purvacharyas. Again, every situation is completely unique, so there's no one single absolute official answer. So it requires introspection for sure, no, and not rushing, because even if you feel something is lacking here, something is no longer as originally. Of course, also something important to say is, things will never be as they originally were. No, watch out for nostalgia also. Like someone I remember told me, Maharaj, I would like to experience my bhakti project as I experienced it in my first 3 months. And I appreciated that, but also I felt I don't want that. I mean, it was beautiful, but it has to move on. It's like if I go to my mom and tell mom, it was so beautiful when we were changing my diapers when I had 2 months old, so let's go back there now. And she will say, no, it was beautiful, but we are not going back there at all. We are ready for something deeper and more beautiful even. So sometimes that can happen. We may be comparing experiences and wanting what happened 20 years ago to be happening now, but that's not supposed to happen. So we need to go through another experience. So that's another option of why we may not be feeling that magic, because a new magic has to manifest. So anyhow, it's a general reply to different possible scenarios.
And it's a little bit related. Gobinda Saha on Facebook says, I'm getting the most help from a spiritual master who is not physically present now, but I'm getting the most help from his lectures and books. To me, he occupies my heart more than my Diksha Guru. Is this feeling right? Again, I don't know the specific case, and I don't know what motivates you to feel one thing or another. I don't know you in person, Govinda Saha, so I don't like to rush and give opinions in situations I don't know in detail. For me, that's impersonalism. And as you know, I'm for radical personalism, but I will say that, of course, there is a place for that to happen. You can have a Diksha Guru, and you can, for some reason, feel a special inspiration with some other guru who is a Purvacharya, who is someone who already passed away. I mean, my point is there's place for that. I'm not saying everyone should feel that, but if that happens for the proper reasons, again, not like as an escape of something I need to deal with my Diksha Guru. So no, I feel more inspired with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. That's it. That's concluded there. No. Probably you need to feel more inspired with the Diksha Guru, but you need to adjust some things for that to happen. But also, again, there is place for that to happen in a legal, healthy way. So I'm trying to make this point so we can see there are so many possible scenarios. It's not just, it only is in this way. This is the magical formula. This is the box. Because again, when we want to be reductionistic and make that everything works in one single official way,
that's impersonalism again, because each person is unique. The journey of each person has to be crafted so specifically. So yeah, there is place for that. But again, with this, I'm not telling you, do it, you are okay, because I don't know you, I don't know the details, but there is place for that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. So we've those questions. I have one last question myself I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
I mentioned it in the first session as well. When I first joined, I thought, because from a young boy, I'd been really interested in philosophy and wanting to understand, in my mind, the truth. So when I came to Krishna consciousness, I was convinced for a long time that I only came because I was looking for the truth. And then maybe 10, 15, 20 years after that, I realized that actually I had been in a great deal of distress as well around the time when I joined. And part of me joining, although I wasn't aware of it, was thinking, I realized I was incorrect later, that I could leave it all behind and that I could just essentially escape it and move on. And so, but I realized as I've become older, it's waiting there for me. You've got to deal with it, right? So, we're talking here about trauma, unmet needs. We all have our attachment styles, and they might be, hurt or broken in different ways as we're growing up. So you have all of these things, these dynamics, psychological, emotional dynamics that each person has, whether they're aware of it or not. And then you overlay that on top of a system where, as you rightly said, this kind of idealistic, absolute ideal of a person, which of course in isolation, we know that all of those things are real, and they, but when you bring, this is the thing about personalism, when you bring it in then to real people. So the person on my end, if I put myself as the person who's the person who might be looking up and wanting this person to be something for me, and then equally, you mentioned earlier, I think it goes both ways. I need you to need me, or I need you to fix me, or I need you to complete me, or whatever the phrase is. Isn't that a lot of expectation and a real recipe for a very big mess unless we become emotionally and psychologically mature, as well as the whole spiritual project?
In brief words, yes. It's a recipe for mess. So I agree that there's a lot of these unresolved issues, and sometimes also it's an important basic point, but sometimes we may be, again, simplistic and reductionistic, like chant Hare Krishna and be happy, so everything will be solved. And yeah, strictly speaking, yes, but what does it mean to chant Hare Krishna in every sense of the term? If you are capable of chanting in that way that everything can be solved, for sure, holy name, Sri Nam, has that potential, but generally we don't have that capacity, and we need to complement our chanting with sometimes even therapy in some cases, and on other type of disciplines to balance our humanity. So I would say that someone serving in the capacity of guru should be aware of that, should be aware that, okay, lots of dysfunctional people may come to me. Lots of people with unresolved issues with their parents maybe want a parent in me, and maybe idolizing me, over expecting from me. And I have to know that's going to happen, and I have to be equipped to know how to deal with that myself, so I don't enter into that game and start to play the character they want me to play and end up believing that, because I won't be helping them by doing that, and I won't be helping me. So I think it's important for someone serving in that capacity of guru. It's a big responsibility to know what to do with each particular person that comes to you, knowing that each of those probably have their unresolved issues, and you need to help them to acknowledge those issues, to deal with those issues, and of course for the guru to deal with his or her own issues, because sometimes
they're a person too. Yeah,
that you are a guru doesn't mean that everything is fully solved. I personally have experience with people who had their own lots of advancement, lots of knowledge, but also lots of unresolved human issues, and eventually they get in the way of their service as guru, and they end up hurting the disciples, creating lots of unhealthy, toxic dynamics, although they have so much qualification in so many other levels, but they have some unresolved human issues that unless they are healed properly, addressed properly, they create, and they end up being absolutized and over worshipped by the disciples and all this mess. So So yeah, I will say that, yeah, both from the side of the disciple and the guru, this human dimension and emotional, psychological layers need to be balanced, at least on some level. Again, we may not be able to balance all that 108%. It's not like until and unless you have that 100%, you cannot practice bhakti. Nobody's saying that. But on some considerable level, that has to happen, because if not, those things will still be there unresolved. And sometimes they end up being justified in the name of, oh no, he's eccentric, or that's his relative side, and that devotee is an avadut, and maybe he needs a psychiatrist, and it's not that he's an avadut. So sometimes we may use all this Gaudiya lingo to justify something or to explain that away, while actually the real solution is something more down to earth, so to say. You need therapy, you need empathy, you need someone to talk to you, to listen to you from the heart, you need to open yourself, and some human grounding, basically, which is so crucial. Because sometimes, again, in the name of transcendence, we stop being humans many times. We use transcendence as an escape device many times. I want to be transcendental, so I have nothing to do with humanity. But as I mentioned in the beginning, our idea of transcendence is Nara Lila, which includes humanity. So we don't have any excuses, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, to neglect our humanity, but all the reasons to integrate our humanity in the spiritual project.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's one last question just come in from Saradiya Rasa, and then we'll finish. She says, if a sannyas guru is clearly breaking some of the principles of the particular ashram, the sannyas ashram, but the majority of his disciples rationalize his behavior and continue to consider him a pure devotee, will their unwavering faith protect them or condemn them? So it was kind of linked to something I was going to ask you, which is, when there's a disciple guru relationship with different genders, what if the disciples are actually in love with the guru? It's similar to this point, I think, that Saradiya is getting at.
Yeah, Madhurya Rasa is only for Krishna. Krishna is the only object of Madhurya Rasa, just in case. But yeah, I agree that those things happen. Again, tied to the previous question, sometimes we have unresolved human issues, not only with our father, and we want the guru to be my father. Sometimes we have unresolved issues on a romantic level, and we want the guru to be our lover, or the guru himself, as I mentioned before, sometimes is isolated in a bubble of performing a certain role without any peer review, without any feedback, and is so isolated and lonely that in that loneliness, he or she may start to do things that are going not in favor of his or her ashram, so to say. So if a sannyasi guru breaks some of those principles, and to mention that, I would like to clarify or mention in one point that sometimes we think, okay, a sannyasi broke a principle. Generally, we may think, okay, he went with a lady or things like that. And of course, I'm not saying that's not breaking a principle, but sometimes we forget that there are some other breaking of principles which are invisible and maybe even worse. Sometimes one may indulge into cheating and hypocrisy and duality and arrogance and envy. And in one sense, the scriptures say that's even worse, but they are invisible. So generally, we are not accustomed to think about those like breaking a principle. So, oh, that sannyasi or that brahmachari did that, or that grihastha smoked ganja. Oh, he broke a principle, and we like demonize the whole thing. But envy and cheating and hypocrisy may go invisibly, and they are kind of normalized. They are not breaking any principle. They are even worse. So I want to make that point, because if not, again, we are just careful of not breaking the principles, the official ones, but we keep breaking the other ones, not thinking that that's also even worse. So I will say that if a sannyasi, of course, has these problems, again, it's a general scenario. I'm not addressing any specific situation, but there is place for and that's said in Krishna Bhajanamrita and other places, the disciple can approach the guru and advise him in service, like, Gurudev, you are going the wrong path. In service to you and with lots of affection, please come back, return to the proper path. What do you need? How we can help you in service so you can continue. We love you. I've gone through that experience myself with my first guru, having to do that myself. I never thought I would have been saying that to my guru, but it was the circumstance. So there's place for that original first initial affectionate approach, trying to help the guru please, Guru, they will love you, and there's so much beautiful potential. Please go back to the proper path. Of course, if in time the Guru continues deviating without paying attention to that, then that's not healthy to continue with that person just in support or helping, because if the person is not willing to change, probably you are not helping at all. Probably you're just there, who knows, nostalgia, sentimentalism, or probably because of some interest, like, okay, I remain here, I have my position, my role. That has happened a lot. I mean, I won't enter into details here of personal experience, but happens a lot. So
don't rock the apple boat, don't rock the apple cart or whatever. Like, keep the status quo, because everyone's kind of like got an invested interest. I think, well, Sardia's kind of final point was slightly specific. She said, if they don't pull up the spiritual master, like if they basically just say, no, everything he does is perfect, no matter what anybody says, it doesn't matter if you can, it's right there, it's visible, they're on that, what we might call unwavering faith. Will that stand to them as a credit, or will that actually not be a credit to that disciple?
Then you are in a cult, I will say. You are promoting cultish mentality. Even if, of course, Gaudiya Sampradaya is not in itself a cult, but you can leave it as a cult. You can express, misrepresent this in very cultish ways. So if you enter into that point of over-absolutizing any single thing, and if the Guru is abusing, molesting ladies, no, he's giving them their mercy by his merciful touch. I mean, I've heard those types of arguments. Like he's giving mercy to be touched intimately by your Guru. That's a very unique privilege. So you can, the danger is that you can justify everything and anything, invoking philosophy, of course, in very strange ways. So that also speaks about the psychology of the follower also. Now, with this, I'm not just putting all the responsibility on the Guru, because also we as disciples have to do our own part of expressing discernment and criteria. So that shows how much you actually want to see the truth, or you want to hide from the truth and continue creating a science fiction movie for you to remain in a comfort zone and keep the status quo quiet and don't agitate. But that's not how faith grows. I mean, faith needs to be challenged, and faith needs to be in connection with actual truth. Now, if not, you are just invoking a perverted version of faith. So basically, that will be the general idea. It's more a cultish scenario instead of unwavering faith. Although you call it Guru Nishta, although you call it strong faith in my Guru, that actually that speaks about something else. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Those of you who are, there's more people on now. I had mentioned at the beginning, the actual idea for this whole conference was a suggestion by Maharaj, and very much appreciated. And the topics that are being discussed, I think, are super important for all devotees, but especially, for devotees who've been thinking about these things and maybe not found other places to discuss them. So I'm really grateful personally, and I'm sure everybody is. I'd like to thank the audience or the community, whatever way we'd like to, dear devotees out there, for joining us. There's 2 more great sessions today. There's a session with Yogeshwara Prabhu coming up, which is about the importance of critical thinking. And then in the evening, there's a session with Keshav Swami about the importance of humanity in our spiritual lives. So a lot of crossover on these topics, but really, really important. I'm going to thank Maharaj, but I'm going to ask you all, I'm going to give you the permission to unmute if you want, and just say a thank you to Maharaj before we finish. But thank you from me, Maharaj.
Thank you so much to you and to everyone else for the invitation. And see you in the next sessions these days of the conference.
Yeah, some people are unmuting now. You can just express your thanks if you wish.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Haribo.
Jai.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Jai. My pleasure. Thank you for being there listening.
Thank you, Maharaj. I'm looking forward to hosting you next month.
See you in California.
I'm very much looking forward to your association and your refreshing perspectives.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
sharing
your.
with as many people as I can, so I'm gonna do my
Fantastic.
homework.
Thank you.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
I appreciate the listening. I remember always this quote from Paul Tillich, who says the first duty of love is to listen. So I always indebted by those eager ears that are present there. So
Fantastic.
Thank-
Thank you all. Thank you, Maharaj. We'll end the session now. We'll see you all soon. Take care. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Leave.